October 23, 1944. The fog hung thick over the Hurtgen forest like a grey shroud, muffling the sounds of the German defensive positions dug deep into the hillsides. Private First Class Tommy Henderson crouched in a muddy foxhole, carefully adjusting the civilian hunting scope mounted on his Springfield rifle. Around him, the men of Fox Company's 2nd Battalion, 22nd Infantry Regiment shook their heads and whispered among themselves. Here was Henderson again, fiddling with that ridiculous mail-order scope he had somehow convinced his captain to let him use in combat. Most of them figured the kid from rural Montana would be lucky to hit the broadside of a barn, let alone contribute anything meaningful to their push through the deadliest forest in Europe. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. What none of them could have predicted was that within 72 hours, this 20-year-old farm boy with his supposedly inadequate equipment would single-handedly cripple the German command structure in their sector and change the course of an entire operation through precision that would make even the most elite marksmen envious. The morning air carried the scent of wet pine and distant smoke as Captain Robert Mitchell called his squad leaders together for the daily briefing. Fox Company had been tasked with clearing a series of German observation posts that had been directing devastating artillery strikes on American positions for the past week. Intelligence reports indicated at least 3 heavily fortified positions containing experienced observers and communication specialists. "Gentlemen, we've got a problem," Captain Mitchell began, spreading his map across a fallen log. "The German spotters up on Hill 267 have been calling in fire missions with surgical precision. Yesterday alone, they directed 17 separate artillery strikes that cost us 43 men." Sergeant William O'Malley, a veteran of the Normandy landings, studied the terrain features carefully. "Sir, those positions are at least 400 yards from our closest approach route. Standard rifle fire won't be effective at that range, especially with the visibility conditions we've been having." Staff Sergeant James Rodriguez nodded in agreement. "The Germans have positioned their observers in reinforced bunkers with excellent fields of view. They can see everything we're doing while remaining relatively protected from our return fire." It was at this moment that Henderson, who had been quietly cleaning his rifle nearby, looked up from his work. "Captain, if I may suggest something." The other NCOs exchanged glances. Henderson was well liked among the men for his steady nerves and uncomplaining attitude, but he was still relatively new to combat. His previous experience consisted mainly of hunting deer and elk in the mountains around his family's ranch outside Billings. "Go ahead, Henderson," Captain Mitchell replied, though his tone suggested he wasn't expecting much. "Sir, I've been studying those German positions through my scope for the past 3 days. I've identified what appear to be routine patrol patterns and shift changes. If I could get into position on the ridgeline about 600 yards northeast of their main observation post, I believe I could engage their personnel effectively." Sergeant O'Malley couldn't help but chuckle. "Henderson, no offense, but that mail-order scope of yours might work fine for shooting white-tailed deer back in Montana. But this is a completely different situation. These German observers are experienced professionals with excellent equipment." The scope in question was indeed a civilian hunting model that Henderson had purchased from a Sears catalog for $12.50 before shipping overseas. It was a 4-power Weaver scope designed for hunting medium game at moderate ranges. Most of the snipers in the European theater were equipped with specialized military optics, like the M84 scope, which cost nearly 10 times as much and had been specifically designed for combat applications. "I understand the skepticism, Sergeant," Henderson replied respectfully, "but I've spent countless hours zeroing this scope and learning its characteristics. I know exactly how it performs under different lighting conditions and weather situations." Captain Mitchell studied the young soldier carefully. Henderson had consistently demonstrated good judgment and reliability during their previous operations. More importantly, the conventional approaches to dealing with the German observation posts had failed repeatedly. "What exactly are you proposing, Private?" Henderson pointed to a spot on the map approximately 650 yards from the German positions. "There's a rocky outcrop here that would provide excellent concealment and a clear field of view. The angle would allow me to observe their positions without being silhouetted against the sky. Based on my observations, they typically change their watch personnel every 4 hours, which creates brief windows of opportunity. The assembled NCOs remained skeptical. 650 yards was an extremely challenging shot under ideal conditions, and the Hurtgen forest offered anything but ideal conditions. The combination of fog, rain, and limited visibility had made precision shooting nearly impossible for most marksmen. Henderson, even if your scope is properly zeroed, the ballistic challenges at that range are significant, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez pointed out. You're talking about bullet drop of several feet, wind compensation, and the need to account for target movement. Yes, Sergeant. I've calculated the ballistic trajectory for my ammunition at that range. The M2 ball ammunition drops approximately 36 inches at 650 yards, assuming standard atmospheric conditions. I've practiced compensating for wind drift and target movement extensively. Captain Mitchell found himself impressed by Henderson's technical knowledge. The young soldier had clearly done his homework and understood the challenges involved. More importantly, Fox Company was running out of options for dealing with the German observation posts. All right, Henderson, I'm going to give you a chance, but you'll have Corporal Williams spotting for you. And if this doesn't work, we're going back to the conventional assault plan. That evening, as the fog began to roll in across the forest floor, Henderson and Corporal Dave Williams made their way carefully through the German defensive perimeter. Both men had blackened their faces with burnt cork and wrapped their equipment in burlap to minimize reflective surfaces. The movement to their chosen position took nearly 3 hours, as they had to avoid several German patrol routes and listening posts. The rocky outcrop that Henderson had selected proved to be an excellent choice. It provided a stable shooting platform while offering natural camouflage and concealment. More importantly, it afforded a clear view of all 3 German observation posts spread across the hillside below. "Range to the primary target," Henderson whispered as he settled into position behind his rifle. Corporal Williams used his field glasses to study the German positions carefully. "I make it 625 yards to the main bunker, 670 to the secondary position on the left flank." Henderson made careful adjustments to his scope and checked his equipment one final time. His Springfield rifle had been modified slightly to accommodate the civilian hunting scope, but the basic accuracy of the weapon remained unchanged. The rifle itself was capable of sub-minute of angle precision at these ranges, meaning that equipment limitations were not the primary concern. As dawn began to break on October 24th, the German observation posts came to life. Henderson watched through his scope as personnel moved between positions, establishing their watch schedules and setting up communication equipment. The routine was exactly as he had predicted, based on his previous observations. At 06:15 hours, a German officer emerged from the main observation bunker and began scanning the American positions with powerful binoculars. Through his scope, Henderson could clearly see the man's uniform insignia indicating the rank of Hauptmann, equivalent to an American captain. "Target identified," Henderson whispered to Williams. "German officer, main bunker, range 625 yards. Henderson controlled his breathing and began his shooting sequence. He had learned through extensive practice that consistency in technique was far more important than expensive equipment. His shooting position, breathing pattern, and trigger control had to be identical for every shot. The crosshairs of his Weaver scope settled on the German officer's center mass. Henderson accounted for the slight crosswind by holding approximately 8 inches to the left of his target. He took a deep breath, exhaled halfway, and began applying steady pressure to the trigger. The Springfield rifle recoiled against his shoulder with its familiar authority. Through his scope, Henderson watched as the German officer suddenly staggered and disappeared from view. Several other German personnel immediately rushed to assist him, confirming that the shot had been effective. "Target down," Williams reported quietly. "Excellent shooting." But Henderson was already shifting his attention to the secondary observation post. The commotion at the main bunker had alerted the other German positions, and several personnel were moving to investigate the situation. This created additional opportunities for engagement. A German sergeant appeared at the entrance to the left flank position, attempting to establish visual contact with the main observation post. Henderson adjusted his point of aim for the increased range and different wind conditions. Second target, left flank position, range 670 yards, he reported to Williams. This shot proved even more challenging due to the increased distance and the target's partial concealment behind sandbags. Henderson had to wait several minutes for the German sergeant to expose himself sufficiently for a clear shot. When the opportunity came, Henderson was ready. His second shot struck the target precisely, eliminating another key member of the German observation team. The effect on German operations was immediate and dramatic. "Henderson, they're completely confused down there," Williams observed through his field glasses. "They can't figure out where the shots are coming from." The German response was predictable but ineffective. Artillery strikes began falling on suspected American positions, but they were poorly coordinated without effective observation. Machine gun fire swept across the hillside, but it was directed at imaginary targets rather than Henderson's actual position. Over the next 6 hours, Henderson methodically engaged target after target. Each shot was carefully planned and executed with the same precision as his first. By noon, he had successfully engaged 7 German personnel, including 3 officers and 4 NCOs. The German observation capability in their sector had been effectively neutralized. The impact on German operations became apparent immediately. Artillery strikes that had previously been devastatingly accurate became scattered and ineffective. German defensive coordination deteriorated noticeably as communication between observation posts and fire direction centers broke down. Fox Company. "This is Overwatch," Henderson reported via radio to Captain Mitchell. "German observation capability in our sector has been significantly degraded. Recommend immediate advance to exploit the situation." Captain Mitchell had been monitoring the German artillery patterns throughout the morning and had noticed the dramatic change in their effectiveness. "Overwatch, confirm your assessment. Are you confident that German observation has been neutralized?" "Affirmative, sir. I count 7 confirmed engagements of German observation personnel. Remaining personnel appear to be maintaining defensive positions rather than conducting observation missions." The American assault that followed was dramatically more successful than previous attempts. Without effective German artillery observation, Fox Company was able to advance across terrain that had previously been impassable. By evening, they had secured all their initial objectives with minimal casualties. But Henderson's most remarkable performance was still to come. The second day of the operation began before dawn on October 25th. German reinforcements had arrived during the night, including fresh observation teams and additional communication specialists. The new German personnel were more cautious than their predecessors, having been briefed on the American sniper activity from the previous day. Henderson and Williams had relocated to a new position approximately 800 yards from the main German strongpoints. The increased range made precision shooting significantly more challenging, but it also provided better concealment and security for their position. "Henderson, the German officers are being much more careful today," Williams observed as they studied the enemy positions. "They're using covered approaches and minimizing their exposure time." "I noticed that too," Henderson replied as he made careful adjustments to his scope settings. "We'll have to be more patient and take advantage of brief opportunities." The increased range required Henderson to make significant adjustments to his shooting technique. At 800 yards, his ammunition would drop approximately 72 inches below his point of aim. Wind effects would be magnified proportionally, requiring precise compensation based on constantly changing conditions. The first opportunity came at 0730 hours when a German communications specialist briefly exposed himself while adjusting an antenna array. Henderson had been observing the position for 20 minutes, studying the wind patterns and preparing for exactly this type of shot. The shot required Henderson to hold nearly 4 feet high and 2 feet left of his target to compensate for bullet drop and wind drift. It was an extremely challenging engagement that would have tested the capabilities of any marksman, regardless of equipment quality. Henderson's shot struck the German communications specialist precisely, disrupting a critical radio link between the observation posts and artillery batteries. The effect on German coordination was immediate and severe. Over the next 8 hours, Henderson continued to engage high-value targets with methodical precision. His civilian hunting scope, which had been the subject of so much ridicule, proved perfectly adequate for the task at hand. The quality of the optics was less important than Henderson's understanding of ballistics and his ability to read environmental conditions. By the end of the second day, Henderson had engaged 12 additional German personnel, bringing his total to 19 confirmed engagements over 48 hours. More importantly, he had completely disrupted German command and control in their entire sector of operations. The psychological impact on German forces was perhaps even more significant than the tactical results. The surviving German personnel were reluctant to expose themselves for any reason, knowing that an American marksman of exceptional skill was operating in their area. This reluctance severely hampered their ability to conduct effective defensive operations. "Henderson, the German artillery has been almost completely silent for the past 4 hours," Captain Mitchell reported during their evening briefing. "Their coordination appears to have broken down entirely." "Sir, I believe we've eliminated most of their experienced observation personnel," Henderson replied. "The remaining German forces are primarily infantry, without specialized training in artillery direction." Captain Mitchell studied the tactical situation map carefully. The German defensive positions that had seemed impregnable just 3 days earlier now appeared vulnerable and isolated. The loss of effective observation and communication had transformed a well-coordinated defense into a collection of disconnected strongpoints. "Henderson, I want you to know that your performance over the past 2 days has been absolutely exceptional. You've single-handedly changed the tactical situation in our favor." Sergeant O'Malley, who had been initially skeptical of Henderson's capabilities, approached him after the briefing. "Henderson, I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you and your equipment. What you've accomplished with that mail-order scope is remarkable." "Thank you, Sergeant, but I think it's important to remember that equipment is only as good as the person using it. I spent a lot of time learning the characteristics of my rifle and scope before we ever got into combat." The third day of the operation dawned clear and cold, with excellent visibility across the entire battlefield. German forces had received additional reinforcements during the night, but they were clearly demoralized and disorganized. The loss of their observation capability had fundamentally altered their defensive strategy. Henderson and Williams established themselves in a third position, this one offering views of the German rear areas where supply and communication activities were taking place. The range to these targets was even greater, approaching 900 yards in some cases. "Henderson, those are extremely challenging shots," Williams observed as they studied the German positions through their field glasses. "Are you confident about engaging at that range?" Henderson considered the question carefully. 900-yard shots required not only technical precision, but also perfect understanding of environmental conditions. The margin for error was virtually non-existent. "I think we can be effective, but we'll have to be very selective about our targets and wait for ideal conditions," he replied. The opportunity came at midday when a German staff car arrived at what appeared to be a command post in the rear area. Henderson watched through his scope as several officers emerged from the vehicle and began consulting maps spread across the hood. The range was 875 yards, requiring Henderson to hold nearly 6 feet high and account for a variable crosswind. It was perhaps the most technically demanding shot of his military career. Henderson took his time, studying the wind indicators and calculating the ballistic solution. When he was confident in his preparations, he began his shooting sequence with the same methodical approach he had used for every previous engagement. The shot struck one of the German officers precisely, causing immediate confusion and panic among the remaining personnel. The psychological impact was devastating. German forces in the sector were now convinced that no location was safe from the American sniper. By the end of the third day, Henderson had engaged 7 additional German personnel, bringing his total confirmed engagements to 26 over 72 hours. More importantly, he had completely shattered German morale and coordination in their sector. The American forces were able to advance rapidly against demoralized and disorganized opposition. What had been expected to be a costly and prolonged operation was completed ahead of schedule with minimal casualties. Following the operation, Henderson's achievements were recognized with a Bronze Star for valor and exceptional marksmanship. More significantly, his success led to a re-evaluation of sniper training and equipment throughout the American forces in Europe. Henderson, what you've accomplished proves that individual skill and dedication are more important than expensive equipment, Captain Mitchell told him during the awards ceremony. Your example has inspired marksmen throughout the division. The mail-order scope that had been the subject of so much initial skepticism became something of a legend among American snipers. Henderson's success demonstrated that civilian hunting equipment could be highly effective in military applications when properly employed by a skilled marksman. After the conflict ended, Henderson returned to his family's ranch in Montana, where he continued to hunt and shoot competitively. He rarely spoke about his wartime experiences, preferring to focus on the future rather than the past. When pressed for details about his remarkable 3-day performance, he would simply say that preparation and practice were more important than equipment quality. The lessons learned from Henderson's success influenced American sniper training for decades. The emphasis shifted from expensive specialized equipment to fundamental marksmanship skills and understanding of ballistics. Henderson had proven that a dedicated marksman with basic equipment could achieve results that surpassed those of snipers with far more sophisticated gear. The German forces that survived the Hurtgen Forest operation would later describe Henderson's impact as devastating and demoralizing. The knowledge that an American marksman of exceptional skill was operating in their area made every exposed position dangerous and every movement potentially fatal. Henderson's civilian hunting scope, purchased for $12.50 from a mail-order catalog, had proven more effective than military optics, costing hundreds of dollars. The difference was not in the quality of the equipment, but in the skill and dedication of the man using it. Years later, military historians would study Henderson's 3-day performance as an example of how individual excellence could alter the course of large-scale operations. His 26 confirmed engagements over 72 hours represented one of the most successful sniper performances in American military history. The psychological impact of Henderson's actions extended far beyond the immediate tactical results. German forces throughout the region became reluctant to expose key personnel, severely hampering their operational effectiveness. The fear of American snipers became a significant factor in German defensive planning for the remainder of the conflict in Europe. Henderson's success also influenced the development of sniper doctrine and training in post-conflict military organizations. The emphasis on fundamental marksmanship skills over expensive equipment became a cornerstone of effective sniper training programs worldwide. The story of the farm boy from Montana, who defeated 19 German officers in 3 days with a mail-order scope, became legendary among American marksmen. It served as proof that dedication, skill, and understanding of fundamentals could overcome any equipment disadvantage. Henderson's rifles and scope were eventually displayed in the Army Marksmanship Unit Museum, where they continue to inspire new generations of marksmen. The humble civilian hunting scope serves as a reminder that excellence comes from the person behind the equipment, not from the equipment itself. The impact of Henderson's performance on American morale was significant. Soldiers throughout the European theater drew inspiration from the knowledge that individual skill and determination could make a decisive difference in combat operations. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.